All right. We're here for another episode of The Industrialist with someone that has probably seen all the underbellies of all the industrial properties there are. Michael Whitehead, Whitehead Environmental Solutions. What's up, man?
Well, having a great day. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're here. This is going to be very interesting because this is you have a subset of knowledge in the world we play in that I feel like a lot of brokers that listen to this, a lot of real estate operators that listen to this, just never we're just looking for that check to go on, but there's a lot. It's a lot deeper subject, so I'm kind of excited to get to all that. But first, I kind of start with your background. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get into this? So,
great question.
Yeah,
I grew up in Columbus, Georgia.
And
I really didn't like it.
No.
But my dad had passed away when I was young, and we moved to Tampa.
Okay.
And I finished up high school there and went to the University of Florida.
So you're a Gator.
I'm a Gator.
Go Gators.
I was there with the good years.
Yeah.
Not the bad years.
Yeah. My all my in-laws are Gators.
Oh, good.
So we're gonna go watch the Gator Texas game in 2 weeks. It's a real rough year for the Gators this year.
Rough year. Got a little better last week.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It did. So but yeah, no, I got a lot of Gator fans. Rob Franks, guy listens to this a lot. He's a big Gator, big real estate broker guy, but he's a big Gator fan. So go Gators. All right.
Go Gators.
So you go to the University of Florida. Why'd you pick University of Florida?
Oh, well, it was in state. I thought about UGA back when I was in Georgia, but when I moved to Tampa, It was in state, and I got some scholarship help and for financial help. Unfortunately, that's when Herschel was at Georgia.
Yeah.
So we didn't win those games.
Yeah. My son, he's a sophomore in high school, and we start looking around at colleges to go to, and he's like, well, maybe I'll look at going to Florida, because he's kind of grown up, kind of a quasi Florida fan, and I was looking at like acceptance rate, it's like 25%.
Yeah.
It's a really hard school to get into.
It is very hard these days. My daughter thought about it, but it was not a good choice. She ended up at Texas.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a really hard school to get into.
So I got my Texas shirt and my Gator shirt.
Yeah. So my nephew went to Texas, so I kind of want to wear Texas gear when I go to the game just to razz my in-laws. But it'd probably make for a bad weekend for me if I do that.
I think so.
Okay. So then in-state, got some scholarships. You go to Florida Gator. You become a Gator. Go from there. What happened?
Well, I studied soils. My mom wanted me to be a dentist or a doctor.
Yeah.
I hated both. And I said, I don't know what to do, but I like soils, ag. My granddad had a mini farm.
Uh-huh.
So I enjoyed it, did my master's there in soil chemistry.
Okay.
And started getting into the metals and other things like that, cadmium, lead, all that kind of things. So when I wanted to do a job, I had some friends that lived in Boston and wanted me to move up there. And I got a job for one of the biggest environmental firms in the state, which was Camp Dresser and McKee.
Okay.
So this guy there was looking for soil scientists. He was the only soil scientist in the firm, Tom Pedersen. So I worked with him, and he put me on these EPA Superfund sites, big time, big property, big deals, big cleanups. So I worked there, and then they transferred me to Dallas because I hated Boston.
Yeah.
And I was trying to go to Florida, and they said, man, all we got is Dallas. Take it or leave it. I said, I'm taking it. I didn't hesitate. I was gone in 2 weeks, I think.
It's cold in Boston, man. It's so cold up there.
Cold and rude.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to be rude. I think it's almost like a game. So I'm used to the South. Everybody's nice. Come on over for the barbecue, soul food, that kind of stuff. I played basketball a lot outdoors. You're not playing outdoors. I would go to the basketball court and nobody was there. In fact, I was talking to some guys. They said, no, we're watching the movies tonight for the NBA Finals. I'm like, oh, man, I got to get out of here. This is wrong.
So a friend of mine, I live in Prosper. A good friend of mine, they got a job transfer up to the Boston area, and they took it, and they went up there for 1 year. And his son's big recruit, committed to A&M right now, and all this stuff. But they moved up there, and he told me at Boston they went to the high school football game, and there's people like just walking around the track like for exercise while the game's going on.
Not in Texas, man. Not in Texas.
Not in the South, right? So it's very interesting, the contrast of what that is.
And Florida's the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida's big on their football. I went to a really good football school. I didn't play football, but Plant High in Tampa, and they won a lot of state championships.
Yep. No, I got to see a lot of high school football too, because my nephew played out there because he was at IMG. So we played
a great school.
A lot of the teams in Tampa and all that stuff.
IMG is loaded.
Oh yeah,
5 4-stars. Yeah.
They just who's next? Who's the next top one? So, all right. So you made it to Dallas.
So I worked for the big firm, and my boss took me to a smaller firm, and we were doing my first job here was the EPA Superfund site, West Dallas Lead. The old RSR smelter.
Okay.
And for the DHA, which was the hood.
Yeah. Which is now changing.
Well, you're right. Singleton and Westmoreland, all that are some of the hottest properties in Dallas.
Yeah.
So we worked there off and on for about 8-10 years cleaning up that Superfund site. So when I came here to CDM, they were only doing water, wastewater, and I'd been trained on Superfund up in Boston. So it gave me an opportunity to get, some leadership roles and working on that big project, because we didn't have a big environmental staff for that kind of work.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I went with him to another firm called RMT, and then I started my own firm, and he came with me. I'm Whitehead, he's Mueller, W&M.
Yeah.
And that was the firm I ran for, 20-something years. Yeah. And so it got to the point it was getting a little cantankerous with some leadership. So I decided, and they wanted to sell to a big firm. And I said, no, I'm not going to a big firm. So I got out. They gave me the money, and I walked away, and they gave me no competition limitations. So I said, I'm starting over. I like to sell.
Yeah.
I like to work. Why not?
Yeah.
But the rude reality is, it weren't as easy as I thought.
Never is.
It never is. That was 2017, and I said, man, my wife's like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, because you go from, there's always a transition from, you were kind of already a business owner, but, there's always a transition from being I always call it from being the machinist to owning the machine shop, and there's that transition where it's like, it's for me, it was just being the broker and the sales guy to like running a platform now. And it's, I used to just, I get in, do my thing, go make cold calls, go make deals, go home. And now it's, I can kind of make some cold calls, but I got to handle a lot of accounting. I got to handle a lot of, all these other things. So there's a lot of challenges that come with owning a business. So,
and that's the bingo sort of moment is, now I got to do all the processes. Like you said, accounting, AR.
Yeah.
I had all these people doing it for me, and I'd not realized that or forgotten that. Now I had to do it all myself.
Yeah. Well, it's not bad to learn things over again.
And that's the truth. And it is. It's nuts and bolts again. And now I'm finally getting those people to help the processes.
Yeah.
My daughter's a real good process person.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible process person.
Does she work for you?
She's working for me again. Yeah. She worked there the early days, and she said, I'm not working for you anymore. And my wife said the same thing. She used to do AR. Who wants to do AR, know? My wife goes, I love AR.
Yeah.
Mostly because she wants the money.
Yeah. No, that's what I do AR here too. Whenever a tenant gets a little too far behind, then it's AR time for me, and it's all facets of all things.
Yeah,
right?
You're like the mafia.
Ownership.
I need my money.
Yeah. Ownership has its privileges. So.
Yeah. So I've got those people. So my daughter's really organized, and that's not my strength suit. I think if you're a salesperson, a lot of times you're maybe not, but she's really good. And so she called me about 2 months ago, said, hey, I'm going to work for you again. I'm going to help you get organized. I'm going to help you build the company.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking small, right? Hey, 2 million, whatever. I'm not going to go too crazy. 10 people. She's going, yeah, you're going 10 million. I'm like, oh man. She's been listening too much to Dan Martell, I'm like, oh boy, that's going to be work. Because I'm thinking lots of people, more work, more processes.
Yeah. So you started Whitehead in 2017. How many people do you have?
I've got 12.
12. Okay. And so you have people that are researching. There's probably like a whole research component, right? Because as soon as you get a site, you got to go scour all the records, and the past history of the site and all that stuff. So, there's in environmental, there's a lot of terms. And, again, like I said in the beginning, we're always trying to get to the check mark. Like, as a broker, we're like, hey, is it clean? Like, great, we can sell this thing and I can get a commission, But, there's some people that specialize in buying environmentally challenged sites. There's, things like that. So, you mentioned a super fund. What does that really mean? So what happened with the lead plant in West Dallas? What caused it to become a super fund? Explain that.
I always joke, super fund, not super fun.
Yeah.
That was RSR Smelter. They got in trouble with the city. The city started pushing lead concentrations in the air, so they started shutting them down. They realized the mess they had made. The DHA was one of the operable units around there. So there were other units like the RSR facility itself. So Superfund was money that they collected. The EPA, I think through their different ways, but they would actually go, DOJ would actually go to all the potentially responsible parties and get money.
Yep.
So RSR was a big one. But the fund has run out of money. So you don't see as many Superfund. And in Texas, it was mostly EPA, but TCEQ and EPA don't always see eye to eye. And so in Texas, most of everything environmental is going to be TCEQ, Texas.
Okay, so the Superfund is a collection of money from bad actors, right? For the EPA.
They go after everybody. If you had one drum, they're going to say,
yeah,
what do you want to pay?
Yeah. And so, so the lead smelter, like, what if they don't have money? Or what if they
And
bankrupt?
That's what happens. There is a fund. They've garnered money from everybody else too. Yeah. So they have money for these sites, but they ran out of money.
Yeah.
Most of these guys, when these big deals, they spend tons of money cleaning up 10 million, 15. I think it was 15 million on just the DHA.
Yeah.
So they're burning cash pretty fast.
Yeah.
And they ran out of money.
Yeah.
On a few, I mean, they could have probably spread it out more, but back in those days, everything had to be cleaned up to the lowest level possible. Today, they've moved toward more risk-based cleanup that's more practical.
Yeah.
Back in those days, everything went to the lowest level possible. We don't care how much it costs.
Yeah. So the lead smelter, so they were releasing things into the air. Were they also pouring it down the drain essentially too? Or were they just dumping it out the back or
They were dumping it out the back. Back then, some people would come and pick up the lead waste and use it to fill in holes.
Oh, like concrete holes?
Yeah, in their pavement or in their driveway.
Oh,
a lot of the people in that area were getting free, fill, so to speak.
Yeah.
Same thing happened at Exide Frisco.
Oh, okay.
So I worked there too.
Where's Exide at? Is it right off the toll road? Right
there?
That site?
Stonebriar.
Yeah. And it's, is it a batch plant right now currently still?
No, that's all shut down. They shut down that facility. City of Frisco owns it.
Yeah.
And City of Frisco is trying to make it into usable properties.
Okay.
Also worked at Exide Motor Street.
Oh, down on where was that at?
Over by the hospital.
No,
out there.
I know, but like where at on Motor Street? On the hospital side or on the other?
No, on the other side.
Okay, which is now medical district.
Correct.
Yeah,
and we did all that property for Jerry Stool in Greenway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Jerry.
Jerry's a big baller because they bought that property at a mega discount, and everybody was afraid of buying it, obviously, because it had been proposed for Superfund and then downgraded to, we put it in the Voluntary Cleanup Program.
Yeah.
So about 8.8 acres, but it was smoking with lead.
Yeah. Yeah. Old Jerry's always down for a little hair on a deal.
It was a hairy deal. And the funny story is, with Jerry, here's a good example of environmental science. You start getting in the weeds of the lead, the cadmium, arsenic, going through the concentrations. Jerry just goes, how much and how fast?
Yeah. Again, he's trying to get to the check mark. That's all we care about, right?
Yes.
So that clean bill of health, right?
I don't care about the lead concentrations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So super funds really aren't a thing anymore now. So, because
they're pretty rare. There's not much. There's very little money.
Yeah, and so what determines, with that little amount of money, if that the super fund can then get involved and help out the project, or like
brownfields. They call it brownfields now, and EPA gives out brownfield money. Like Denton still has some. Dallas used to have a lot, but the old what is it, the old Montgomery Awards building there, was money from the brownfields.
Okay, so they give it to the municipality versus the actual property owner to do the work. Okay, so the municipality then delineates who gets funds to clean up their site when they contaminate it. So they actually are getting paid for their sins. Is that correct in a way?
But there's not that much money, and the city's, it's only going to be certain projects that the city wants. You're not going to, if you're a regular commercial deal, you ain't getting no money.
Right.
It all goes to now, the TCEQ in most states have gone to voluntary cleanup programs, VCP.
Yeah.
So that you're voluntarily doing it with your money. And that's been the best venue to clean up properties, get them cleaned and get them sold.
So, okay. Is any site not fixable?
I always tell people, we can fix any site. Now,
Chernobyl?
No, those are sites, No, but how many of those sites are there? I mean,
one.
for you guys in Dallas, Fort Worth, I mean, you're not going to be dealing with Chernobyl. I mean, there's a few sites that just don't pencil.
Yeah,
but
because of the cleanup.
That's right.
Like you couldn't give it to me.
No.
No. I wouldn't take it for free.
Do you know Carter Fournier?
No.
He used to work at Greenway.
Okay.
He calls me at a site in Grapevine and said, "Hey, man, we got a really good discount." And he was going to buy it for just a couple $100,000. But I called the other consultant. I said, "What are we talking about here, man? How long?" "Oh, man, 15, 20 years, a couple million." I'm like, "Carter, don't walk, run." There's no, it's only 200, even though he's almost giving them the property.
Is this a 30,000 foot building in Grapevine?
I can't remember.
There was a building in Grapevine, and man, there was an environmental issue with it. No one could ever figure it out, and someone finally figured it out. And we actually lost a tenant to it the other day because it's finally been figured out. But by an investor.
Let's talk about that one after. We may be in the same building.
Yeah, but this is
a podcast.
I looked at that building and I was just like, man, I don't know how to fix it. Like, so
most properties, and it's can be cleaned up and closed if the deal makers on both sides can come to an agreement.
Yeah. So what are the ways that sites truly, what are the different things that get contaminated? You got the groundwater, you have the soil. I guess you have a vapor release in the air.
Yeah.
What is there anything else really?
In some cases, you have surface water and sediment, but that's not many properties. If you don't have a pond on site, that's not going to be the case. So it's primarily going to be soil and groundwater, and less so with soil gas, soil vapor. Texas still is not pressing hard on regulating soil gas.
Okay. Soil gas. So that's gas emitting from the soil because of something that was put into the soil?
For example, gasoline.
Okay.
Gasoline has benzene. Yeah. So benzene has a very volatile component. So if it's technically soil gas is groundwater moving up through the soil and into the airspace of the building.
Okay.
So benzene is going to migrate upward into the building.
So underground fuel tank leaks.
Exactly.
Comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do they allow underground fuel tanks anymore? I guess gas stations, right? Yeah.
Still they do.
Yeah. It seems like, we deal with a lot of these low coverage sites that have some kind of truck rental or fleet rental stuff, but they all seem to put above ground tanks on everything now. And I don't know if that's because maybe they're leasing it and maybe that's a more cost effective way to do it. Or I just don't know if that's a regulation thing.
It's not regulation. I think if you've been burned bad by petroleum storage tank case, underground storage tanks, you start to think, hey, our attorneys and everybody else is not anymore.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, if they manage their tanks well, it's fine. And a lot of guys are still using underground storage tanks.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing that I see, let's talk on underground storage tanks, is a lot of times we get into a transaction and it'll come up that there was an underground storage tank, and let's say it was removed in the early 90s or late 80s or something like that. And there's just not good documentation on what happened. Is that have you seen that situation?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like the TCEQ cleared it, but there's an environmental consultant saying, hey, we don't know if this was done properly, even though it was cleared. So what do you have? That's grounds for a phase 2, right?
That's a great point. We run into that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And bless their heart, TCEQ. I really love working with them. Great organization compared to many.
Yeah.
But if we go to try to get files, it is really difficult to get files these days, especially pre-2000.
Yeah.
So a lot of the local offices, if Fort Worth is hard to get any information. There was a guy named Lonnie Gilley. He knew everything. He knew every corner, every file. I could call Lonnie and get anything. He retired.
Yeah.
Abilene is pretty good where they'll give you files and they can talk and they can dig through their stuff. But some of the offices are like, we know nothing.
Yeah.
Send in a public information request. So in other words, the files are incomplete and you're looking for the no further action, the details of the data.
Yeah.
Very difficult to get. And you hate to have to say, we're going to do a phase 2 when they closed it.
Yeah.
So you can sometimes work around it. But again, it's always about finding the data. Because I always tell, it's like cash is king.
Yeah.
Data is king.
Yeah.
For me, data is king.
Yeah. Yeah. That gets you to a yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That gets you a lot quicker to a yes. Okay. So, environmental, the owners, I've been in situations where we found a property. Hey guys, there's an environmental issue with the property. We'll sell it to you. We'll sell it really cheap, but you have to clean it up and we're going to waive all indemnity from you. Or I'm sorry, you're going to indemnify us forever on this. That has killed a lot of deals for me because they want to be exonerated. And what I learned on it was, and I want you to elaborate on this, but like if I have a site and that site is contaminated and I take on that owner's liability for the site for a discount on the price, could 10 years later the next door neighbor call me and say, you contaminated my site? And I go, well, wait a minute, it wasn't me, it was him, but he's gone. I have no liability. Am I then liable?
I'm not an attorney.
But
they don't pay me attorney money.
Yeah. Okay. But is that a scenario that could happen?
Yeah, it could. I think we run into that from time to time. Yeah. I think I look at it, if you close the site through, say, a TCEQ program like Voluntary Cleanup or Innocent Owner.
Yeah.
The TCEQ said it was clean. I think they have a pretty tough point to make or small or bad leg to stand on.
Yeah. If
they're trying to sue you for liability when the TCEQ said it was clean, especially voluntary cleanup versus, let's say, petroleum storage tank. You go through there, they give you a no further action, super vague.
Yeah.
With voluntary cleanup, they give you a certificate of completion for all contaminants, all media, and all current and future landowners. So you're going to sue me over that? TCEQ said all current and future landowners.
Yeah. Okay. That was a site. There was a site we looked at in Mesquite, and there was I think Univar Chemicals just poured everything down the drain there. But you had to take it with all the liability, and I don't think we were willing to do that. So
I've worked with Univar.
Yeah.
We did the Farmers Branch for Don Goldman and Jerry.
Okay. So as okay, there's a lot of acronyms. A lot of acronyms in your business. But let's just start at the beginning. The first thing is a phase 1. Right? You get a site under contract. I get a site under contract. Michael, hey, I need a phase 1 done. And why do I need a phase 1 done? The bank's going to require it. And I should probably just get one to know what I'm getting into. And that's the first step. So explain what a phase 1 really tells you at the end of the day.
Well, I always say too, even if you had cash up, you buy the environmental.
Yeah.
So you're not just buying the property, you're buying the environmental.
Mm-hmm.
A phase 1 is just the first look to tell you if you have a problem that you need to dig deeper.
Yeah.
So do we need to do phase 2 to really see what we have? Or is it's just a preliminary review inspection?
Okay, but there's no soil testing.
No.
There's no sampling of anything in that situation. You're just gathering the historical uses of the property, and has there been an incident at the property, a recordable, right? Then in a certain time frame. So So after that, what things lead you to saying, and I'm not, I know this isn't, I know you try not to go to phase 2 if we don't have to, but sometimes you do. And what are the things that you see? What are the typical things that you see that lead you to having to do a phase 2?
By the way, I look at the phase 1 as like a triage at a hospital.
Okay.
Hey, he's got a sprained ankle. The guy's got a heart attack.
Yeah.
You're trying to offload sites that don't need a lot of work. Phase 2, VCP, whatever. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to say these are simple enough. We're just going to keep it here at phase 1. Everybody's happy. Mm-hmm. This move into a more strenuous evaluation with phase 2 because it warrants it.
Yeah.
One of the big ones is Sanborn fire insurance maps show gas stations on a property.
Okay.
If it had a gas station in the 40s, 50s, 60s, there was no controls. Yeah. Most environmental rules were 1976 RECRA. And, Clean Water Act, 1970. There were no rules. This is like Australia, no rules until the 70s. And even then, it was probably 10 or 15 years. And underground storage tanks started being first looked at in 1988 and then 1998. Mm-hmm. So there was no rules, so they could do a lot of things. So you started to have to look at those older gas tank sites, dry cleaners. So you're looking at the Sanborn map, it says cleaners.
Okay.
And you're thinking, that we got to look at. So dry cleaners in gas stations and urban areas are usually a lot of times your first look.
Okay, so the audience of this podcast is a lot of industrial people, but you have dry cleaners, but they always send their stuff off to industrial sites a lot of times to be cleaned. Essentially, they're a collection point sometimes. But
not in the old days, though.
Not in the old days.
Yeah.
So I was saying that's what they kind of are now. A lot of them are kind of in that model now. But in the old days, so you always hear about dry cleaners. So explain what dry cleaners did to be such an X. Big red flag whenever you're buying a property was there a dry cleaner near. So what did they do?
Correct. So in the early days, they used kerosene and gas for cleaning clothes. Smell a little gassy.
Yeah.
So PERC started after the war or during the war when they, had problems getting gas. Mm-hmm. And PERC is odorless, pretty much colorless. I mean, it has a light smell and it works great.
Yeah.
It's like sugar. Ain't nothing better than sugar.
Yeah.
You can have all that organic stuff, the monkey fruit or whatever, but I'm telling you, nothing's better than PERC. They always talk about the other stuff. But PERC is volatile. It has a low, it's very difficult to clean up. It'll remain in the soil 50, 60 years. It breaks down very slowly. And when it breaks down, it goes into worse compounds or bad. Trichloro.
Okay. Let's back up. You said it's volatile. What does that mean?
That's going to cause soil gas problems and vapor into the building.
It's going to cause vapor.
It's a vapor problem. And it degrades into trichloro, which is also a vapor component.
Okay. So it produces a bad offspring, essentially.
It has a lot of bad offspring.
Okay.
Trichloro, dichloro, and vinyl chloride, all bad guys.
Okay. All right. So how would this get in the ground?
Well, it can go through concrete. In the cleaning machines, the belly tanks, they will leak and it'll go through concrete. It'll go through cracks.
Okay.
So the sewers, a lot of times where like PVC, even with glue, it starts to loosen up the glue and start to go through the wastewater lines. And they can legally discharge wastewater effluent with PERC to the city sewer. So that water is leaking through.
So if it's leaking anywhere down the line, it's coming out with PERC in it.
That's right. So a lot of times where the machines are in the back, if they have a little sump in the back, a lot of them have discharge where they have sumps through their wastewater discharge lines in the back of the building or wherever they are. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they dumped it on the concrete because at $250 a drum, and they're doing shirts for 49 cents or 79, and they're barely making money. So the guy's coming to pick up 4 drums of PERC for $1,000, and he can't make the payment. He's thinking, I'm dumping that.
Yeah. Okay.
So there are a lot of ways they can get into the soil groundwater.
Do they still use PERC?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's like sugar.
Yeah.
You're still using sugar. They're still using, they always say, using PERC? No PERC here. We're like, they're using PERC.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my wife wanted to go some organic cleaner, and they were using the green stuff. And she had to travel almost 45 minutes. She said, I'm not doing that no more. I'm using the PERC place.
My wife went to this organic cleaners one time and I got the bill and I was like, this is ridiculous. Back to the perk shop.
Back to the perk shop. And we're back to the perk shop.
Sugar,
Yeah, man, it's good. So a lot of guys have tried the petroleum solvents. They don't work as good, and they'll probably go back. Yeah. But it's used extensively. It works too good.
Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's right. So the other thing, we look at industrial facilities, like an RSR, Exide. Those are going to show up in those Sanborns, and they're also going to show up in historical. Plus, when you go to the databases with TCEQ, and they list all the components, like they're using perk, trichloro, dichloro, MEK. There's an acronym, methyl ethyl ketone. And they're large quantity generators, and they have a bad history of compliance.
Yeah.
You're honing in on their TCEQ hazardous waste databases.
Yeah. So adjacent sites could trigger further investigation on your primary site, right? And are there previous uses? Is there a previous use that you just, if there's no data on it, you just automatically go to a phase 2 on? Or is it, if there was never a reported issue, do you think you'd still hang around in the phase 1 world?
I don't try to automatically go to phase 2. I think the challenge is the phase 1s are so cheap.
Yeah.
And you're usually going to use your greenest people in the firm to make the money on them. So that you really don't want to think hard. And I think that's the difference we try to do is dig.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times if you can dig, you can clarify.
Yeah.
And keep it out of going to phase 2. For example, sometimes the databases show all these compounds, but they really didn't use all those compounds. They're just a certain listing for a waste.
Okay. So like that certain industry is known to use those kind of compounds, but that doesn't necessarily mean that user at that site previously was using those compounds.
Correct. Sometimes the digging helps, but most with an ESA at 2,000 or 2,500, you just don't have a lot of time to dig.
Yeah. So, you get all these records from the TCEQ. You hear the EPA and you hear TCEQ. Do they work together? Do they work separately?
They're pretty independent.
Okay.
They say they're together, but we rarely are going to be involved with EPA.
Yeah, I had a buddy tell me about a site he had under contract, and he goes, "Oh, the EPA is really happy." And I was like, I've never even heard the EPA involved in a deal, So is there times where they do get involved in sites, or? DHA
was EPA TCEQ joint.
Okay.
They do SPCC plans for industrial facilities. They're involved in that, but they're not.
What's an
spill prevention?
Spill prevention.
So if I have above ground storage tanks, oil and gas, EPA regulates that, but most things, they have a memorandum of understanding, I think they call it, with the TCEQ that in most cases, TCEQ has primacy over most all environmental in Texas.
Okay. And when you're doing a phase 1 and you're doing research, is the TCEQ a resource that you can call and get answers on, or can you just get what is on their files from them?
We can do both. I have a really good relationship. They have some great people I've known for a long time.
Yeah.
Called a guy yesterday. So, guy doing a deal, Preston, I think his name's, called me, and I called his internal guy at TCEQ, and he was really good. He called me back. We chatted about it. He gave me some detail. So there's some guys, and if, for example, say I can't get a report, it's 2 weeks to get their public information request, or 3 weeks. I could call a case coordinator, and they will be very generous and say, okay, I'll get you that voluntary cleanup site report. I'll send it to you today.
Yeah.
Or I'll say, hey, I would like to see the groundwater data. He goes, okay, I'll send it to you. So there's some great coordinators there and people, staff. And over the years, we have had good relationships with those people so that we can get that information. It's like in your business, too. If you have good relationships, you can get good information.
Right.
If you get everybody mad at you and you're hard to deal with, you get what you get.
Yeah. There you go. Hey, back to a super fund real quick. If I remember there was a property in Houston I was representing somebody on, and they're like, "Oh, this is in the super fund." Okay, so is that a good thing that it's in the super fund?
I don't think it's ever good at super fund.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm saying is that there has been an incident that has been, the site has been investigated and it has been deemed to get fixed. So if it is in the Superfund, are you then, you're on a path to a clean bill of health, right? So from that degree, is it kind of a positive?
Yeah. I mean, not all Superfunds are the same.
Okay.
West Dallas was all cleaned up. They got all their closure. That's fine. Those properties have been cleaned up and they will not be reopened. For example, the lead concentration for cleanup is 500. So if I do a normal site in West Dallas outside of the closure, they look at 15 ppm, which is a crazy number for lead because every property in Texas has 15 parts per million lead.
Parts per million, okay.
ppm. But if you're in West Dallas, it's 500 and it was in that closure area, it's closed.
Yeah.
I don't have to say I got to do all this phase 2 sampling if I'm in that DHA area or the surrounding area for the old Superfund.
So you can have a lot. You can get the lead out.
It's a little bit. Yeah, you can get the lead out. You got a little bit of a get out of jail for lead, arsenic, and CAD, which you don't have on a property outside of that. So there's another thing too. We did a job in Wiley. I started it. My old company finished it. It was old chemical recycling over there on the east side. What is it off the main road there? Just to the south of west of 78, I think. And in that case, they call it ready for reuse.
Okay.
But the ready for reuse was only for metals. They were using chlorinated solvents.
Okay.
So they weren't dealing with the solvents. They were only saying ready for reuse. And our client was thinking, oh, it's ready for reuse.
Yeah.
We're like, not so fast. Like Lee Corso, not so fast.
Yeah.
We had to go through voluntary cleanup.
Okay.
To get that closed. And we also use the groundwater restriction of a Municipal Setting Designation, MSD.
Okay.
And the MSD is a really great program.
Okay, so let's get into the VCP and the MSD because that are usually two things. And I'm gonna try to explain it, then I want you to elaborate on it.
You bet.
The VCP, I'm buying a building. I can go through the VCP, the Voluntary Cleanup Program with the TCEQ. Cost me $25,000 to $35,000 ish, maybe, to do it. And that runs with my ownership of the property. When I go to sell a property, the next owner will have to enter the VCP program and do it all over again, versus an MSD is longer and runs with the deed, the chain of title with the property. Is that all accurate statements?
Okay, so voluntary cleanup is for you and future owners from now to doomsday.
Okay, so it runs with the property.
It runs with the property. It is done.
Okay.
And they don't reopen VCP cases.
Okay.
Unless you request it. We did Univar. We closed commercial under corrective action.
Okay.
And then we came back and closed it for VCP residential. We opened that one. But when they close it, it is closed, and it's for now to the next owner, to the next owner. Innocent owner is more where if you get an innocent owner closure, which says you didn't cause it or contribute to it, each new owner has to recertify the IOP.
Okay, I'm sorry. IOP. I'm getting my acronyms mixed up here.
That's okay.
IOP. So a lot of times in transactions, people will say, hey, just get an innocent owner and get an IOP. How long does what is the process of getting an IOP? What's involved? What's the cost and what's the time frame?
Now, IOP is more the 20 to 35, 25.
Okay.
VCPs are always going to be more than that. They're going to start around 65 and they could easily go to 100 if there's any response actions.
Okay. So a VCP actually it could be whatever the number is to do the cleanup, right? So one, there's the cost to get into the program, which is the 60-ish thousand. And then there's the cost of the actual cleanup of what the
correct
what that recordable or whatever it is happened. So, and so that runs with title. What about an MSD?
Okay, so the MSD is a use restriction for groundwater. So if I get an MSD in Dallas, they're saying you can't drink the water.
Yeah.
Now, we don't drink the water anyway, right? We get it from the city of Dallas, North Texas Municipal Water District.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, that's an easy one. Fort Worth, same thing.
Yeah.
So they have, Dallas and Fort Worth have great MSD programs, which says you can't drink the water, so we're eliminating groundwater from the cleanup. Most cleanups are based on groundwater.
Right.
So if I got a soil contaminant problem, I just dig it out.
Yeah.
I could dig it out, whatever time frame. But cleaning up groundwater is taking years. So a lot of these cleanups over the years have, the Universite.
Yep.
20 years, $5 million.
Took 20 years to clean it out.
The other guys were spending 20 years and $5 million. So we came to the city and came to our buyer, which was Don, and said, hey, let's try the MSD. We called them the Univar guys. Have you tried an MSD? And they're consultant. No, can't do an MSD. So Don says, let's go to the city, talk to the senior people, see if they'll consider an MSD. Mm-hmm. First time they said no. Second time they said, yeah, we'll think about it. Same thing with Wiley. They were like, I don't know about that MSD. What is that?
Yeah.
Well, one day we had a big meeting with the mayor, and everybody said, I don't know about MSD. And the mayor said, hey, sounds like a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Do that MSD. So the MSD has a city component that environmental has not had in the past.
So it has some political.
Yes, because in the past, you just go through TCEQ. Yeah. Now the city's engaged in environmental and has a public meeting.
Okay.
Most of those are pretty small, but every once in a while, you get a lot of people.
Depending on the proximity of probably residential owner-occupants.
Yeah. So the MSD eliminates groundwater so that your VCP, instead of doing a lot of cleanup physical, especially groundwater, remember 20 years, $5 million, that was all because groundwater cleanup of perc and trichloro are so difficult.
Yeah.
You cannot get every little bit of perc out of this groundwater, and any little area you left starts to degrade and spread.
You think there's perc in this water right here?
I hope not. I doubt it.
So, okay. I'm going to do an MSD if I have determined that the contamination on a property is in the groundwater. If the groundwater's fine, I'm not doing an MSD. If it's a soil contamination, then I can just cut it out and send it to the bad soil lot, and then that's it. That's remediation.
Yeah.
And with that, you would enter the voluntary cleanup program to then take the soil out in that situation.
Yeah.
If I have a building like that.
So you have a choice. You could do corrective action or VCP. If I'm in an industrial facility, I'm still operating, they usually prefer corrective action.
Okay.
For real estate deals, you like that VCP because it's a great deal maker in that, hey, all contaminants, all media.
Yeah.
But for a big industry that has multiple problems out there and they just want to address one problem, they're going to choose corrective action.
Okay.
So the other thing I might mention is sometimes the MSD can help your soil because most cleanups for soil are either soil itself or soil moving to groundwater. So if you take out the groundwater, you're only dealing with the higher cleanup levels of soil only.
Yeah.
So if I get an MSD on an only soil problem, my cleanup levels go way high and I can reduce my cost for remediation.
Okay.
Again, going more to a risk-based closure options versus trying to spend 20 years and $5 million on a cleanup.
So why, if we don't drink the water and have you seen an MSD get shot down at the city level?
No, but I've been wrestling with one that had some pretty good action.
Yeah.
But I think, we'll see.
Yeah.
Me personally, no yet.
Okay. And what would be the reasoning for an MSD? What would be the opposition to a site getting MSD at the city level if we're not going to drink the water anyways?
It's a good question. And I think most cities have been pretty open to the MSD. Sometimes cities don't have the staff to deal with it.
Okay.
And that would be, a small town. We did, what's that little town? Fairfield? Is that the one south? I get them mixed up. Fairview, Fairfield.
Yeah.
So we went to the little city of Fairfield with a guy, and he wanted to clean up the site. It had a perc. We thought it was on cleaners, but we couldn't really get proof of the cleaners. And that little town, we're like, how are we going to get an MSD for this little town? They had, usually when you call them, they go, what's an MSD?
Sure. Well, I mean, you probably have someone working at the city that's also in the volunteer fire department.
That's exactly the case.
Yeah.
But we did get an MSD.
Mm-hmm.
Funny story, we had the public meeting and we walk up and there's all these people upset and mad like a hornet's nest. There was like 300 people there and I'm like, man, we in trouble tonight.
Yeah.
But we found out they were going to fire the city manager. So I asked the lady before the meeting, I said, what's going on? There's a lot of activity here. She said, we're going to fire the city manager tonight. And we were doing our presentation, talking all this technical stuff. And the mayor finally says, hey, I think we had enough of the environmental. We got some other business to do tonight.
Yeah.
I called him the next day and said, yeah, we fired him.
Well, did they just give you your thing? Because they just wanted to move on?
They gave us the MSD. Yeah. They gave us the MSD.
Yeah.
The point being, it's not always about you, at a city meeting.
So if so we worked on a property that we were trying to buy. We were talking to you about doing this one. It was one on Singleton, and the owner of the property didn't contaminate the property, but the groundwater underneath it was contaminated. And we were going to look at going to MSD. I couldn't finance it because of that contamination. And the owner was going to owner finance it for me. And we looked at going to the MSD process. And so explain kind of step by step. If I'm going to purchase a building and I'm going to hire you to go through the MSD process, what are all my steps and phases and costs, and like what does that all look like from start to finish?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
You do the city application. Well, you got to be in a program. So you don't go to the city of Dallas MSD, Lori Chulson, and say, hey, I'm not in a program, I want to do an MSD. So you got to get in a program. They prefer VCP, for example, or corrective action. So you get in a program first with TCEQ.
Okay, so if I'm going to buy a property as a new property owner, and I'm going to take on this MSD process, then I'm probably going to go into the VCP program,
probably,
right?
Yes.
Because not a corrective action. That's kind of, as you said, more if someone's sitting on that site and has multiple things going on, they're going to fix this. They're going to put a Band-Aid on, or not a Band-Aid, but they're going to stitch up this part, right, and then go to the next part later.
Correct.
But we're gonna most likely file for a VCP. So we file for the VCP. What's that process look like?
It's just an application and a fee.
Okay.
You send in whatever your phase 1, phase 2.
Okay. And how long does the approval take on that?
2 weeks.
Okay.
Sometimes 30 days.
Okay. So after that, 2 weeks, and what's the fee on the VCP typically?
The application's only $1,000, and to put the application together, about $2,500.
Okay, so we're $3,500 in and 2 weeks into this, and then we go to the city saying we want to do an MSD.
Mm-hmm.
So from that part,
you do the MSD application.
Okay.
MSD is going to run. Application process is pretty onerous. It's like, I think the city of Dallas has a pretty big fee. If I'm right, it's about 10 to 14 by the time it's all done.
Okay.
And I think they let you do it in multiple payments, if I remember right. But an MSD for Dallas is going to be about 40, 45 by the time you're finished.
Okay.
That's on the good side. And some of the other cities are a little less, like 30, 35.
So I file my application. I give them my first couple grand on the MSD. What happens then?
You're going to have, you got to put together the MSD application, which is pretty onerous. There's a lot of mail outs and notifications. That's probably the hardest part. You have to have.
Who are we notifying?
All the neighbors that are within a certain distance, all the water utilities.
What's the typical distance that you're notifying?
I think it's a half mile for residents. It's 5 miles for retail public utilities.
Okay, so residents are half a mile. Other commercial property owners, are they also half a mile?
If they have a water well.
If they have a water well.
You're going to get into a bigger distance. Yeah, we had to notify all the water well owners, and that takes a lot of time. You have to do triple notices 3 times.
Okay, so how far out do you have to go find a water well?
5 miles.
Okay, so you have to go research who has permitted and drilled a well on a site and go a 5 mile radius and pull all those permits and see if there's anybody. And that's all on.
We do banks, mm-hmm. or, some of the different groups like that, EDR. I mean, they will do those searches for you and show you all the wells.
Okay. So the city of Dallas just isn't going to hand that to you. That's something you have to go do.
We have to do it, and that's part of the fees and the timing. That takes the most time. They call Fort Worth and Arlington. We did one in Arlington. Man, just crazy homeowners calling me all the time.
Sure.
That they got the notice.
They don't understand what it is.
They have no idea.
Yeah. So how you have to field all those calls?
Well, you don't want them calling the TCEQ on you or the city.
You need to make just a video and send it to them. Say, hey, here's an explanation.
That's a good idea.
Watch this and then call me if you have any questions.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I do with our deals when we send them out to banks. I make a whole video because, we send it out for debt. I don't want to have the same conversation 20
It's a great
times,
idea. But Dallas, we haven't in the past had to notify many people, but Arlington, Fort Worth, it's a lot more people.
Okay, so the city, at a city level, this isn't TCEQ level, they designate how far you have to give out notice.
The MSD ordinance and the MSD with the TCEQ are pretty much the same.
Okay, so if I'm in Arlington, it's half a mile on residents. If I'm in Fort Worth, it's half a mile on residents. You're not going to go to another town and say, you got to go out 4 miles. No one's going to say that.
No, that's 5 miles for the utilities. For example, in Fort Worth, we had Samson Park and all these people, and they're non-responsive, or most times. I mean, you have to dig to get those small, like the trailer home park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Didn't speak English, don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
They're like, you say environmental, and they're like, I ain't talking to that guy.
Yeah. Okay, so really the time frame. Okay, so you file the application and then you start sending out notices, and you have to send 3 notices.
3 rounds.
3 rounds,
and make sure you got certified mail and all that stuff.
And what's the cadence between the rounds?
I forget. I let my staff do that, but it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
and some places are very more non-responsive than others.
Okay, and you have to get 100% responses.
Okay, so when you go to the next step of TCEQ, they're going to fight for every one of them. So we had a couple that the city said, we don't even have a well. So we had to send that information to the TCEQ person and finally get them to approve and move forward on the MSD. So it's a Texas 2-step. You do the city MSD first. Once the city approves it, you can go to the TCEQ to certify it. The TCEQ will not even look at it till you have the approval from the city you're in. Fort Worth, Arlington, Grapevine.
So I've got all my, how long does it typically take to get the approval from the city based on your giving notice to everybody?
Depends on the city.
Okay.
City of Dallas is the longest.
Okay.
It used to be about a year, but it's edging to 2 years.
Okay.
Some of the smaller cities like Grapevine was super fast. We did the In-N-Out for John T. Evans when he was here. John's a great guy to work for, but there was 4 months. I think the mayor wanted that In-N-Out burger. So, if they want to move it, they can move it. Fort Worth is great to work for. Okay. Dan Miracle, Roger, they do about 4 to 5 months.
Okay.
So it depends on the city and their load. Dallas obviously has so many MSD requests. They are the king of MSDs right now. They've done the most. Houston and some of the other cities are probably in the middle. Mm-hmm. So it depends on the city.
Okay. So the city gives me my approval of my MSD. I take it to the TCEQ. Are they going to try to poke holes in it at that point?
They always try to poke little holes, but they got their procedures, but they're pretty good to work. They're good to work with.
So once it gets the TCEQ, what's that time frame look like?
Oh, I think they have a 90-day review requirement. Sometimes there's comments back and forth, but they're usually pretty good, about 3 to 4 months.
Okay. So then when they come back with comments, is there action items to do?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What are your typical action items that you're going to be given on your MSD application?
The last one was they wanted us to clarify some of the water wells that they were not in use. They wanted us to visually go take a look at it, things like that.
Oh, okay. All right. So
they wanted proof.
So it's really proven up a couple adjacent owners. Now, if someone does an MSD on a site, next doors could potentially have the same issue.
Yeah.
Right? Do they have to do an MSD? No. Do I get to ride for free because the neighbor did the MSD?
What we did in some sites is we extended the MSD boundary. So we went to the neighbor and said, look, so you have a choice. Okay, if I got a groundwater plume going off site to the neighborhood, do I want to talk to their attorney? No.
Yeah.
It's better for my attorney to extend the MSD boundary.
Okay.
And say, we're going to include you for free, man. Or, some cases they ask for money. Mm-hmm. But it avoids litigation from a neighbor that says, I got perk on my property from you.
Yeah.
And he found it when somebody did a phase 1 and said, now I've got perk, I'm going to sue you. Or you can clean up my property, or hey, I'm going to do the MSD for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done a couple of properties. We extended that MSD to cover all those offsite properties. That one on what David Wilanowski was looking at, that was downgrading of the Univar site in Farmers Branch.
Mm-hmm.
That site chose not to be included in the MSD, but the one south of him did.
So he got the benefit for free. And then this other guy, the Wiggs' site, had to then go through an MSD, because why would you choose not to go through an MSD?
Most people just don't know what it is. MSD, MSG. They're like, what the heck is that?
Yeah, I don't need any sodium in my life.
When an attorney or anybody calls them, they're like, I don't want to talk to you. You know how people are. You deal with that in real estate, don't you?
Sure.
You try to get them a deal, and they're like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. It's that's okay. That makes sense. So, but let's talk about the notification radius. If I'm on a property and I have to give notice within a half-mile radius, shouldn't that kind of absolve everybody shouldn't that include everybody in the half? When you give notice, do you offer them the ability to participate in the MSD?
No, they just have to know about it for the public meeting, if I'm correct.
So, but if I'm in that half-mile radius and there's no, we don't go capture all of that, and this site has an MSD, the next door site was just notified but didn't participate in it, and I want to buy this adjacent site, and we had an off-site plume that caused this contamination, does my adjacent site now have to go through an MSD process?
No, you choose to or not. I mean, TCEQ doesn't chase a lot of people. I mean, TCEQ and the old EPA too don't have enough staff to find everybody that may have contamination.
Okay. Let me back up. Let me ask that question a different way. A site, because this is kind of a situation that happened. This site on Singleton went through an MSD, got the designation. I tried to buy the building 2 doors down. It did not participate in Site A's MSD. If I want to buy that property and get bank financing on it, am I going to have to go through an MSD?
Yeah, but let me ask you, if it came from off-site, you could get an IOP for that plume.
Okay.
I'm assuming there were other problems with that site other than what was the contamination for the MSD?
I can't remember. It's been 2 years.
It's say it was benzene say they had an off-site benzene plume and I didn't cause or contribute to benzene, but maybe I had a lead problem.
Okay.
I could get an IOP for the benzene, which is cheaper than an MSD.
Okay.
So, 15, maybe 30. MSD in Dallas is 40 to 45 at least, and 2 years. So maybe I do an IOP for the plume off-site, but I have my own problems that aren't part of the plume that I would close through VCP probably. So I have a combo VCP, IOP. Happens all the time.
Okay.
MSD would cost too much money. So in other words, just say we're looking at options, Jeremy, and we would say, we like MSD, but since we didn't do it, we got to do it from scratch. It's too long and too much. Let's go to another option.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's move on to being like a property owner with tenants. What are things to look out for? What are uses to look for that you might want to stay away from? And, obviously big chemical plants or something like that, those kind of stand alone. But, more your kind of common uses, auto, obviously dry cleaning. But, any other kind of uses that, if you take those people on as a tenant, just buyer beware, or they need to have a very good system in place. Like, what kind of tenants would you look out for if you were going to put them in your property?
My first comment is this. It's amazing, but in most cases, you never see those guys paying the bill. It's always the property owner in most cases.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the old cleaners is a good example. I'm thinking, I have rarely seen the cleaners. There's a few of the big name cleaners that was their building, they cleaned up their properties. But most like strip centers, that guy's gone. You cleaning the property.
Right.
I would say cleaners are number one, obviously.
Okay.
Other guys that are large quantity generators of chemicals and storage of chemicals, they're going to be other problem guys. Chrome platers, things like that as well. Okay. Chrome plating, chrome is a pretty big problem. Cause a lot of problems to properties in DFW. So,
what about anodizing?
Anodizing, yes. You're going to need to look at anodizing. So I think a lot of guys now, they're doing tenant reps and so forth, they get an attorney involved and they write up some legal language. They have liability for the tenant.
But if the tenant goes kaput, that doesn't matter anyway.
Well,
it's
I guess
like a
not.
personal guarantee, right? Like how many times do you really enforce a personal guarantee?
In those cases, though, I've seen people say no.
Okay.
I'm not going to have... Some of these retail centers say no cleaners if you're using PERC. You want to use DF2000 or Exxon, whatever, you can do that. But we're not going to let you use PERC.
I don't know how many people have ever been into a chrome plating facility, but if you have, it feels like you're inhaling cancer, like just breathing in there. I don't know how people work in there. It's truly unbelievable.
It's pretty scary, isn't it?
It is. You know, I come from a metal background. I used to send a ton of stuff out for plating, anodizing, you know. We were buying we had a building under contract in Irving, and it had a metal finisher in one of the buildings. And I walked in there and I was just like, oh, hell no. I don't want. This guy doesn't have the wherewithal, because I was going to have to probably raise his rent too, because he was not paying near rent. I'm like, this guy's going to get pissed off, pour something down the drain. I got a problem there, you know. But man, the metal finishing places like that, man, they are just, I don't know how people sitting there all day long. I don't know how that's not bad for you.
But I think it is bad. I mean, I think that's, OSHA, everybody's been cracking down on those people. So we've worked a lot for metal guys in the past.
Yeah.
Gray iron foundries, finishers, chrome.
What about, so you have your metal finishers. What about, but powder coating? That's not a bad, that's actually like a clean use, right? Like you never have any issues with a powder coater in a facility, right?
I'm sure people have. I haven't personally.
Yeah.
Obviously, those kind of technologies are a lot better than the older technologies that have evolved over the years.
Okay. What about auto users? Everybody seems to always think auto users have a big environmental risk with them.
That's a really good question. And I see that too. Mm-hmm. Over the years, I would say I have seen very little big problems from those brake shops, auto shops that you're talking about. I mean, sometimes a hydraulic lift, but a hydraulic lift is not a big deal. Let's just pull it out and go. And that hydraulic fluid is not going to go very far.
Right.
So you might have some minor cleanups, and I'm sure there's been a few big ones, but me personally, in 35 years in the business, have had very few bigger site cleanups for brake shops, auto shops. It's usually going to come glitching on an ESA, but in my understanding of contaminated properties, that's on the low side, based on experience.
Yeah, I seem, we have quite a few auto tenants, and everybody seems to get really, really nervous around them. But I've always been like, you have a car in your garage.
It looks bad.
It looks bad,
but it's not really bad because there's a lot of heavier components.
Yeah. Let's talk about lifts, because that is something that comes up quite frequently in these industrial buildings. What is the fear of lifts? So they install the lift into the ground. The hydraulic goes into the ground. So the fear is that the hydraulic casings maybe deteriorated, weren't maintained, and the hydraulic oil seep out into the soil. Yeah. Right? Is that? And
most of them have a canister, like a 50, 100-gallon canister in the ground too, and then they get the lifts coming out between them. So when you open up, cut the concrete, they have a pretty standard design, and sometimes that leaks. They've been in there a long time, brakes plus Midas. But oil is heavy. The hydraulic oil is heavy, and it has a really low toxicity compared to, say, gasoline.
Yeah,
it doesn't have benzene.
Okay,
I mean, benzene or the whole gas compounds. It's always about benzene, which is a carcinogen.
Yeah,
cleanup for benzene is 5 ppb. Most of those other compounds in gas are way higher. Same thing with hydraulic oil. They just don't have the toxic components the gas does.
Okay.
So even if it leaks, you can dig out the soil to a pretty shallow depth underneath the lift, they're about 8 feet down, and haul it off.
Okay.
So it's pretty basic, I think, compared to, say, gasoline leak.
And when you dig that up and haul it off, Where does it go?
It goes to a landfill.
But a special landfill or just the normal landfill?
No, it goes to a special landfill. Typically, waste like that's going to go to a Class 2 non-hazardous or Class 1 non-hazardous.
Okay. And so that's all they take. What all does a Class 1 or Class 2 landfill take? They don't take the garbage, right?
Well, I mean, like Itasca, I think, they have different cells or whatever, or different landfills for different things, like municipal waste. But they have special cells, the clay line to meet TCEQ and EPA requirements so that they can take Class 2 at a certain level. So they have different levels for lead, arsenic, benzene that meets Class 2 levels. And if it gets hotter, it's going to Class 1 non-haz. But if it's really bad, it's Class 1 haz.
Okay.
And that's big dollars.
So that's where a lot of the money in cleanup comes in. Is just the transportation and the dumping of it. Because, I mean, digging out 8 feet of dirt is not a lot of labor, right? Now, like when you do asbestos, they have to do all this stuff. But like when you have to dig out soil, you're just digging out soil, right? I mean, there's not like a hazmat crew coming in for that. Like, but a lot of the cost seems to be associated with the movement and storage of it.
Correct.
At the end of it.
And there's really not 8 feet of soil. So you cut that concrete, it's a pretty big void space.
Yeah.
And then you got a little bit of soil at the bottom. So you may only have 1 or 2 yards from each lift.
Yeah.
So instead of having to dig the whole thing. So once you pull that lift out, it's a lot of open space between the cylinders and the container.
Yeah. Okay. Any other tenants? What about printers? Seems like printers always get a bad rap because of ink.
They were in the older days because they use trichloro and other solvents to clean all the rollers and everything. But they've gone to soy inks. I mean, their toxicity at printers has gone way down over the years. So you're looking for those old printers that show up in those old fire insurance Sanborn maps.
Okay. All right.
But I would say this. Looking at printers over the years and actually sampling at printer sites, I would say they move to me a little on the lower side. I mean, to me, it's dry cleaners, and dry cleaners. They're way over here to the right on the spectrum, and then you got printers. Every once in a while, you hit a printer with a little bit of contamination and some maybe a little more. But if you did 100 of them, you wouldn't have a big number that you had to do cleanup closure. Dry cleaners, if they use PERC for a long time, they're on that high end.
What about machine shops? They produce a lot of coolant that goes out into 55-gallon barrels. But I mean, is that stuff really too concerning? Or
it's lower on the toxicity, so lower.
Okay.
So you'll see those cutting oils and so forth, and the metals. Sometimes you'll have more metals, some metals like lead and so forth, with those type of shops. But again, unless they've had a big release, they have the roll-offs and they're always leaking out the back. And if it's a chronic problem for like 30 years, it becomes a bigger problem.
Gotcha. Well, what was the most challenging environmental when you had to? What was the most challenging property you took on, or site, or multiple sites at once? Like, what was your hardest one?
A lot of bad hard ones. Hard clients, hard managers at TCEQ, and I've had good managers at TCEQ too. But Exide Battery was a bear.
Where was that located?
Motor Street.
Okay.
One, because that was a production facility and it had a lot of lead, and they'd supposedly cleaned up some of it, a previous consultant. When we were digging around out, we ran into like a cistern and there was pure bags of red lead. It looked like orange gator colors.
Yeah.
Hidden on the site. So, I mean, that site had really high levels of lead, percent rise. So it had a little bit of a unique challenge. Plus, it had some chlorinated solvents from a neighbor.
Yeah.
So we had to deal with that too. So a site that big, 8.8 acres, I think it was, that's had a lot of nuances.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
Yeah. How long did that one take?
I don't remember. Probably about 2 years total.
Yeah. What is it now?
Medical facilities, Ronald McDonald House.
Oh, okay. They put the kids on it.
You can't.
Yeah.
And it's safe.
Yeah. That's right.
They did a great job.
Yeah. Well, let's see. What so, we were kind of talking about this before we started, but like, an environmental can make or break a deal, really quickly. Lot of people are waiting on that. Phase one's glean. All right, all this effort can move forward. So, you're in the business of making deals. You're in sales. If you own a business, you're automatically in sales. So tell us about the nuance of like, you're dealing with, and I'm saying I'm saying from the perspective of a broker or a buyer, you're dealing with sometimes environmental people that get off in the weeds very hard and maybe make mountains out of molehills and stuff like that. So kind of explain where does all that lie in this world?
I like to look at it as we're the solution to pollution.
Solution to pollution.
Or, we see food differently.
I still want to make you your shirt that says I eat VOCs for breakfast.
Oh, I would love it. Thank you. I think, again, I agree. Like I said, I had the guy years ago at the old company. They had gasoline running down the street. Mm-hmm. And he had to get a work order in place and signed before he'd do the work. And I think it was Exxon. And Exxon had told him, hey, if you don't get out there and do it today and fix that leak going down the street, we're going to fire you. And he said, well, no contract, no deal. And they fired our company. That was a company I worked for years ago, not my company.
Yeah.
That digging in about the rules. Mm-hmm. And I've had employees personally would say, Mike, the TCEQ guidance says this, you can't do that. I said, man, I've worked with a TCEQ for 30 years, and I can tell you that if you call them, they'll work it out with you.
Yeah.
And I said, we're going to call them right now, and we'll see what happens. And guess what?
Yeah.
They give variances, like everything in business.
Yeah.
They will give variances. Now, not always. I mean, they're fair guys, and they're fair young ladies. But if you don't ask, or at least try, mm-hmm. Rules, there's a lot of variance in any rule or guidance. Most of the time, it's not a rule, it's a guidance.
Yeah.
So even my own internal guys or other consultants, it's a rule. You can't do that. Really? Mm-hmm. Let's call them. Let's go meet with them. Okay, there's a thought. Most consultants would just send them an email.
Yeah.
Why don't we go to the Austin office and sit with them and chat? You're amazing like any other business, which you can get face-to-face, right?
Totally.
But most consultants would never, ever considering meet in person.
That this is a very big pet peeve of mine, what you're talking about. And I see it with a lot of maybe younger brokers or something like that. But they love to say, I'll ping him again. And I'm like, motherfucker, go to his office.
See him, yes.
Go get up in his office and get the answer. Like, go make a deal, So it's good to hear you say that, because I think that's what deal making is about. This is, at the end of the day, you go back to this is real estate, and it has to deal with real people and real things that you can touch and feel. So go out and touch and feel them, you will get ghosted, and you will, if someone can just say no to an email, that's the easiest thing they can do with it. No one loves to like dig in with an email, but if you go get up in their office and like, hey man, like I really need this. I really need some help here. What are our options? Then they're like, well, you could actually do this, or you could, maybe we could look at it this way, versus just going, nope, that's the rule. When you rule check with an email, you're going to get the answer. Yeah. That's the rule.
Yeah. You're not going anywhere.
No. So I'm glad you say that, because I think that's a very good thing for people to hear about you and your firm, that it's not just you're not just an engineer. You're not just you're the solution to pollution.
That's right.
So
here's a good example. So this lady called me because somebody said, call me. She had been working on this site for 20 plus years. And so I called her and said, asked her how long. I said, how much have you spent on this environmental?
Yeah.
Oh, well over $1 million. I'm like, I said, how much you burn? What's your burn rate right now? About 100-something thousand per site. And I said, have your consultant ever come to see you? No, I never met him in person.
Oh,
I'm thinking
wow.
the dude's been over $1 million and never came to talk to her.
Wow.
I said, look, I'm going to come see you tomorrow and we'll talk about your site.
Yeah.
And I don't even have the job.
Yeah.
She was telling me about the burn rate. I said, well, I can cut that and you can go buy your daughter a Mercedes or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the point being, the bigger point was they didn't even reach out to say, let's talk and get that personal. I mean, her paying that much money, you could see the pain in her face.
Yeah.
What can I do about that? So if you don't feel that pain as a consultant, they're spending that kind of money, it pushes me to push harder. If TCEQ guy says no, I go, hey, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Is there a way we could spend a little less money and get to the same place?
Yeah.
Versus, I just send you an invoice, you pay it, and I don't know who you are.
And then I'll send some more emails they'll say no to, and I'll invoice you for that. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the question I always ask is, the question I asked her, what are they doing to move you to closure? Not just sending you a bill. I hate to say it, but it's like almost a medical at some point. Mm-hmm. Do they really want to fix you? Yeah. Do they want to give you a remedy to fix you? The environmental is no different.
Right.
I exercise. I'm 65. Mm-hmm. I still play basketball and run.
Yeah.
You're healthy. Your brother, y'all exercise, do stuff. Mm-hmm. Eat as good as you can. We don't eat perfect, but we try to eat good.
Yeah.
What's your fix? Are you just going to be doing environmental from now to doomsday and just get a bill?
Yeah.
You're going to be sick all the time and not have a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Just treating the symptoms, not the problem.
And consultants are no different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's deal making is all about, identifying the real issue and solving it. And I think that's something that is very critical when you're in sales. And that's really the fulfillment side of what you sold. I always say there's 4 components to business. You have marketing, lead generation, which brings you to the point to be able to say, to close a sale. And then there's the fulfillment side. And the fulfillment side is actually, getting to that solution or what you sold that you can get done. And, there's numerous times we've been on pitches or something on the brokerage side, and you hear someone, they're like, "Oh, well, I've got a broker." "Oh, really? What's his name?" And they're like, John. "Who's he work for?" I can't remember the name of the company, but he's come by here a couple times to see me. Or he's called me a couple times, whatever it is. I love the fact that you're willing to get in the car and just go drive down there. Like, I'll tell you what, the other day I had a situation. I'd sold a boat. I had a boat dealer sell a boat for me, and they sent me my check, and that check bounced. And I called them and I said, "Hey, your check bounced." And they go, "Well, let us call you back." I called them back 3 hours later, and I said, "You haven't called me back yet." "Well, I don't have an answer yet." I go, "Well, give me an answer by the end of the day, because this is fraud." I was up in their office at 8:30 in the next morning. I got my wire. I was like, "They're hey, we'll cut you another check." I go, "Nah, no. How about a wire? How about a wire? Here's my wire instructions." But you have to go get that handled, and it's the same thing with anything in life. You can't dodge. Don't dodge things. People seem to dodge things. We have tenants. Hey, you haven't paid. We talked about this. Now you're dodging me. Once you dodge me, it's then the executioner comes out, and so it's I think getting in front of people in person is huge, and it's truly the way to win business. So
100% agreement.
Well, let me ask you this. If you weren't doing environmental, what would you have done? What do you think you would have pursued?
I don't know, but I like what Tom does. I love working with people. I like training. I like working through issues. So, I'd love to sort of do that with help training people and helping people grow in whatever business, even like real estate as like an expert or whatever. But
Yeah, you could definitely be like a sales trainer.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm not good enough to sell property, but I'm good enough to sort of encourage and help guys work through problems. I like what Tom's doing.
Yeah.
I'm not as big as Tom, but
Tom's a big teddy
he's
bear.
a big guy.
Yeah. So, well, let me ask you this. What's something that not most people know about you? What's something unique or different, anything?
That was a hard question to think about, but my dad had a P-51 and used to race at Reno.
Really? Okay, the Reno Air Show or whatever?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow. Did you ever fly?
No, I flew in his T-28. He had a T-28 trainer, which is, military plane, but not as fast as a P-51.
Yeah.
They race, so it was modified.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Oh, man. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
My Florida Gator in-laws, they go to those air shows a lot. So
really?
I've been to them, so.
See, we got a lot more in common than you would think.
Yeah. So my wife's grandfather was a fighter pilot in World War II and had a whole squad, led a squadron and all that stuff. So, so my father-in-law is really into the flying and the history of all that. So, yeah. So
I could always hear that sound when I hear P-51. It's P-51.
Yeah. There's a little municipality airport right by my house in Prosper, McKinney, and they have all those kind of planes flying into it. So I'll be in my backyard and I'll see these vintage, World War II type planes and all that stuff. So it's kind of always interesting. But, well, let me ask you this. I always like to ask people if they've ever, if there's ever like a book or anything that they've read or something like that was like kind of really instrumental in their life or anything like that. What about you?
More recently, my wife gave me Buy Back My Time, Dan Martell.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a good delegator.
Yeah.
So, and in one of his videos, he says, who's the first person you hire? Who do you hire? And everybody says this and that. He said, executive assistant.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, man, I need to get an executive assistant. My daughter called me like the next day. You need an executive assistant.
Said, you're hired.
You're hired. She's offloading that stuff I don't like doing.
Yeah.
Madison, I'm like, man, she's doing stuff. I'm like, man, I've never done that.
Yeah. No, well, it's, there's an evolution where in the beginning you trade your time for dollars and then you eventually start trading your dollars for time, and, it's just, it's a non-renewable resource we have, or we don't have. So, it sounds, that's a very critical thing, delegating and time blocking and all that stuff. And probably being able to, that's been a big part of us building the team here is like, man, you got to have people that can go handle these certain things and I don't touch them, So
you guys got great people.
Yeah, no,
you and Jeff, y'all got great people. Yeah. I like working with all your people. I mean, it's really been standout.
Yeah.
Joey's been a great guy to work for, and stuff.
Yeah. No, Joey loves working with you. And,
Tom Ling. I mean, everybody in media go, wow, these are some great guys.
Well, we got into using you because we were working on a deal and Joey's very slow to change. Joey's a mechanical engineer. So like, he's an engineer mind. He's very pessimistic. Everything's always wrong. Nothing's ever going to get fixed right. Everything's going to take 10 times as long. He's very pessimistic. So when we were working on a deal and our environmental guy just started popping all these phase twos on us. And I was like, man, I need, and Roger Galt actually got me in touch with you.
Yeah.
And,
Roger's a great guy.
And Roger and I were buying a building together and Joey was very like, oh, I don't, because Joey's really into the environmental side of it. He loves digging into that part. And, I remember he finally came to me probably about the third or fourth day. He goes, man, I really like Michael. So I'm like, well, good. I'm glad you like the vendor I forced you to start using. Yeah. So no, we really appreciate, all that you do for us and the responsiveness and the solution to pollution. So, it's always been great working with you and, I think we probably talk every week. At least you're talking to somebody on our team probably every week about something,
And thank you.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. We appreciate all that you guys do. So, what's the best way for people to reach out and get a hold of you? Because there's a lot of guys listening to this that might need a new environmental guy. So
call me. I love to talk.
Okay.
One of the things I do is I don't need a job to take a look, and I won't charge. If somebody calls me to ask questions and look at a report, I'll look at it for free.
Yeah.
Now, if I have the right time, I'm going to charge them.
Yeah.
But if they send me a phase 1, phase 2 and say, hey, What do you think? I will look at it and I will call them back, and I will call them back quick.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other component.
Yeah.
When you're doing deals, and you do a lot of deals,
mm-hmm.
you want quick action.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear 3 days later.
Yeah.
Deal's already gone, man, by the time you call me.
Yeah.
So I like to call same day if possible. And I'd love to help people, even if they just give me a ring.
That's great. Well, we'll put all of your contact information in the show notes and all that stuff so everybody can reach out to you. But, just for anybody listening to this, we do a ton of transactions. Michael does all of our environmental, and it's a great firm to work with. As you can hear from him, very responsive, which is, to your point, Michael, extremely important. You're right. I want quick answers, and I'm demanding of those things when I have to get them. And that's never been an issue. So, and then always just the ability just to call you up and be like, hey, what do you think about this, man? And that's, that's been a great benefit of working with you. So
you don't want to get bill. You don't want to get a bill for going to lunch with somebody. It's like,
right.
They charge me the hour. What's going on?
So, well, man, I really appreciate you being on. I appreciate you taking time and coming out here and telling your story and explaining all the acronyms that we all hear thrown around in this world. So,
well, thank you, Jeremy. It's been a great time.
Yeah. All right. Michael Whitehead, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.